She was a single mother trying to make a fresh start.
She was well liked by her family and friends, seen as generally a good person.
She was single and she was freewheeling and full of life.
But instead of finding a second chance at love, she made a dangerous enemy.
She tried to provide the best for her family, but sadly, she let evil lurk in.
You can spend that much time with somebody and be so off on what they really are.
911, what is your emergency? He's in a car, the window's broke, she's bleeding.
Investigators would be pushed to extraordinary lengths to unravel the mystery and bring a killer to justice.
He thought he was being followed, and he was, as it turned out. That surveillance video is very telling.
One of them was right back when she was killed.
Oh my God.
As far as just being tragic and bizarre and twisted, it ranks very near the top.
July 5th, 2003. Shortly after 11 p.m., police in the Tampa suburb of Pinellas Park received a panicked 911 call.
911, what is your emergency? I heard a noise that woke me up. I came down, she's bleeding. I can't get her to respond. Okay, what is it? Get her to wake up.
First responders arrive at the home of 37-year-old Sandra Razzo to find her collapsed in the driver's seat of her BMW.
There was glass everywhere in the garage. There's blood everywhere inside the car.
It was a brutal, terrifying crime. At this point, we didn't know if she was still alive or had passed away.
They hurried her very quickly onto an ambulance into the closest trauma center.
Along the way, they determined she's been shot several times in the head, chest, and legs.
They didn't know she had actually been shot until they started treating her and they realized how many injuries she had.
She was shot 8 times at close range.
Sandy Razzo was transported to the local hospital where she was pronounced dead. At that point, they shifted it to a homicide investigation.
Back at the crime scene, detectives searched for clues to tell them what happened.
At the scene, we still had kind of a mess to deal with. I mean, we had a lot of broken glass and blood and just things that we weren't sure were going to be evidence yet at that point.
On the floor, they saw multiple shell casings, which are expended cartridges from a firearm, a .22 caliber rifle, which totaled 8.
Once we realized we had an actual shooting, those things run through your mind. Is it a robbery? Was it an ambush? I mean, what are the circumstances?
Her wallet's right there on the floor. Sandy Razzo's money, credit cards, everything. The car's still there. You begin to rule out robbery almost right away.
One thing seems clear. This was no random act of violence.
If 8 shots were fired, that sends a message of this is personal.
It was someone who didn't like Sandy, someone that had had a problem with Sandy, someone who wanted Sandy dead.
In 2001, Sandy Razzo was going through a breakup with an ex-boyfriend in Alabama. She needed to make a fresh start, so she moved to Tampa, Florida, and settled into the middle-class community of Pinellas Park.
She was just such an outgoing, positive personality, was very much into being a friend to people.
She was a single mom, doing everything that she could to make life better for her child.
She was sharing custody of her daughter with her ex out of state.
She worked at a place called Green Iguana, which is a very popular hotspot, especially late at night.
Sandy worked in an area of Tampa that was really the go-to place for nightlife. This was a place where you went to party.
Sandy, she was very outgoing, very athletic, friendly, helpful, a good employee. We all worked the same hours. These are basically just the weekends from 9 o'clock till 3 in the morning.
Sandy was working hard and saving money, sharing a townhouse with her close friend Tony Ponicall. But less than 2 years after moving to Tampa, she would be gunned down in cold blood.
We dispatched 2 detectives down there to start interviewing him and finding out what he knew.
Mr. Ponicle was the person who discovered the body. He was the person that called 911.
Tony was at home asleep, and he heard a loud bang, and he went downstairs to investigate.
Tony Ponicle told us he did hear the shots going off, and he thought they were just fireworks left over, from the 4th of July.
We realized the car was there, and he went out. He found Sandra bleeding and moaning in pain.
He panicked. He was terrified.
Tony Ponicle then immediately runs back into the house and dials 911 and reports, "Oh my God, my roommate has just been shot. I think she's dead. Please come, please come."
As Tony tells his story, it becomes clear that Sandy was a lot more to him than just a roommate.
He is destroyed. He is emotionally distraught.
We found out in the investigation he wanted more out of the relationship, maybe it to blossom into boyfriend-girlfriend type relationship, maybe an engagement down the road or marriage.
Tony claims that he respected Sandy's decision, and things had remained platonic between them. But investigators can't help but wonder, had he really taken her rejection so calmly?
Mr. Ponicle, we definitely viewed him as a suspect, being that they were in a close relationship. Those are the people that we want to start with at first.
Coming up, police explore a new suspect and discover another layer to this growing mystery.
He beat her up and raped her and held her prisoner for 2 days.
He absolutely rockets to the top of the list of potential suspects.
Pinellas Park detectives are investigating the murder of 37-year-old bartender Sandy Razzo.
Sandy's roommate, Tony Ponicle, the guy who calls 911, the guy who admittedly had a romantic interest in her, but she didn't want it.
At this point, you don't know if he's a suspect or not. Obviously, you want to include those folks who may be a suspect until you rule them out.
Detectives secure the crime scene and begin collecting evidence. But to their surprise, Tony also offers to let them search his car and personal belongings.
He was very cooperative with us, giving us consent to collect evidence from his vehicle, from his home, and giving us honest answers to all the questions we were asking.
Tony has been cleared as a suspect, so police expand their search in hopes of finding a new lead.
She worked at a bar, and that would open up avenues for us to get to know who would know her and who might want to harm her.
The number of times a person is shot when they're murdered says a lot about the person who pulled the trigger. And in this case, we have 8 rounds. That's rage.
Tony tells detectives he knows of someone that fits that description perfectly. A man by the name of Tracy Humphrey.
Tracy worked as a bouncer at the bar where Sandy worked, and that's where they met.
He was a model employee and the kind of guy you want to be friends with.
Tracy also worked as a personal trainer in a nearby gym, and he liked to entertain Sandy with tales about his past.
Tracy begins to explain to Sandy that, I used to be on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I used to be a star in Iowa on the football team there at the university. I was a model.
Tracy had sort of pestered Sandy to go out with him, and she resisted that.
When Sandy said no, that was it. Game on for him. Tracy starts to become a little bit clingy, and she immediately begins to back off.
But Tony tells police that one night in February of 2002, Tracy crossed the line. He asked Sandy for a ride home, and then somehow talked her into going inside his apartment.
She alleged that he attacked her, sexually assaulted her.
He beat her up and raped her and held her prisoner for 2 days.
When Tracy finally let her go, she sought refuge with a friend who encouraged her to contact the police.
She tells him what happened. And immediately, Tracy is brought in and arrested and charged with this kidnapping, sexual assault, rape.
If you looked at the crime photos, she had a very strong case against him. There were bruises all over her face.
But not everyone had been so quick to believe Sandy's story.
He came across as being so kind, caring, Never heard him raise voice, anything.
He explained to me, like, hey, I had an incident last night. I'm kind of worried. We had a crazy, wild sex thing, got out of control. And she seemed to like it. And it's kind of scary now because, she's acting weird about the whole situation.
Eventually, his case was set for trial. He was looking at perhaps 10 years or more in the state prison.
But before the trial could take place, Sandy was murdered.
He absolutely rockets to the top of the list of potential suspects.
Detectives pay Tracy a visit at the fitness club where he works, in the nearby town of Brandon.
We tried to interview Tracy Humphrey. However, there were allegations by Sandy, so he respectfully declined to do an interview at the advice of his attorney.
Despite Sandy's disturbing allegations, Tracy appears to have put the past behind him. In fact, he'd just gotten married the day before the murder to his 20-year-old protege, Ashley Laney.
Ashley had met Tracy while she was working at a smoothie shop, and he worked at a gym nearby.
She started practicing personal training sessions with him so that she could get her personal training certification.
She seemed like the wholesome girl next door, and they really seemed like they were happy into each other.
Just 9 months after they met, the pair decided to tie the knot.
They got married on July 4th. They didn't go on a big honeymoon. All they did was go to the beach.
She wanted to get married on a day where every year they would have fireworks on their wedding anniversary.
When police question her, Ashley says she and Tracy were both at home the night Sandy was killed.
They did order pizza, and her friend Toby White had come over to visit. Toby was there at the house and saw them together.
Ashley was a straight-A student, no criminal history, didn't get involved in anything bad.
I don't think she had as much as a traffic ticket in her history.
Detectives tracked down Toby White, a close friend of Tracy's.
The police had contacted me, I believe it was probably 2 or 3 days after the murder, because Ashley had told them I was with them.
She says, I was over Tracy's all night long on July 5th. Ashley was there. We got pizza. We watched a movie.
At the time that the shooting occurred, he had a pizza delivered to his home and had a receipt for it. And the delivery man easily remembered delivering it to Tracy Humphrey.
And their home is 45 minutes away from the scene of the murder. It appears neither of them could have been involved.
Tracy had motivation, but his alibi checks out. Ashley Humphrey didn't even know Sandy Razzo.
But if Tracy didn't want Sandy dead, who did? Coming up, a witness changes their story, and a new piece of evidence turns the case upside down.
Somebody's not telling the truth, because technical forensic evidence does not lie. So the question is, who had the phone in his or her hand, and who's lying?
Just a few days into their investigation of the murder of 37-year-old Sandra Razzo, detectives have hit a dead end.
Her roommate, who called 911, and Tracy, who had a motive to kill her, you've eliminated them. So as investigators, you're scratching your head. Somebody wanted that woman dead.
But when investigators talk to Sandy's friends and family, they soon come up with another lead. Her ex-boyfriend in Alabama, who has primary custody of their 13-year-old daughter.
Whenever there's a custody battle with a child involved and one of those two people get murdered, you have to look at the other person.
We did travel to Alabama to interview Sandra's ex, and as well as talk to her daughter.
There was a solid alibi. They were both in Alabama at the time that the murder occurred. So we were able to rule him out as a suspect or a person of interest.
Detectives once again find themselves back at square one until they receive an unexpected phone call from a witness who wants to change her story.
Toby one day calls us and says she would like to meet with us as soon as possible.
Toby came back to us and said, I wasn't with Tracy at all, that he had asked me to lie for him early on.
Toby claims that after she found out about the murder, Tracy invited her to the house and asked her to provide him with an alibi.
My feelings about Tracy being a suspect initially were there's no way he could possibly be involved in this. He's not that kind of person. He said, I don't know what I'm going to do if you don't go along with me being with you that night. I have to have an alibi and you're going to have to be it. I kept telling myself, he must really feel that he'll be a suspect, so he has to have an alibi. That must be why he's doing this.
Toby initially gives the alibi, trying to be a good friend.
But in the days since then, Tracy seemed to become more paranoid and began threatening her.
She starts getting concerned. Some of the physical threats while she was working out with Tracy, where he was saying if she talked to the police, something could happen. Toby changed her story.
I was terrified. When you feel that your family could be harmed or you could be harmed, and unless they can arrest that person right that minute, you're vulnerable to them.
But even though Toby has recanted her statement, the rest of the couple's alibi still checks out. Investigators obtained Tracy's cell phone records, hoping they might reveal some discrepancies.
We learned that his cell phone was communicating near his residence there in Brandon. So it was obvious that his phone and him was at the residence in Brandon and nowhere near Pinellas Park at the time of the killing.
Tracy's phone calls prove he was exactly where he said he was. However, the same can't be said of Ashley.
They found that she was not at home, or at least her cell phone wasn't, on the night of Sandy Rosa's murder.
In fact, cellular tower activity showed Ashley's phone was used from a very suspicious location.
There was phone calls being made between Tracy Humphrey and Ashley Humphrey, back and forth, from his location in Brandon to the location right outside where Sandy was working.
But does that mean Ashley is the killer, or was someone else using her phone to cover their tracks?
Somebody's not telling the truth, because technical forensic evidence does not lie. So the question is, who had the phone in his or her hand? And who's lying?
Cold-blooded murder doesn't seem to match Ashley's profile as an honor student. But when investigators dig a bit deeper, they discover Ashley's past is much darker than anyone realizes.
Her mother was an alcoholic. Her father was in prison.
You see violence. You see a young girl being raised by her grandmother, whom she counts on for everything, and then that grandmother dies. You see a broken person.
She was looking for something. She was looking for a father figure, and Tracy Humphrey provided that. Tracy provided security.
Here's this older man. He is muscular, but also very kind of sensitive. She sort of fell under his spell.
He begins telling Ashley, I'll take care of you. I'm going to sculpt you into the perfect woman. I'm going to help you work out, and you're going to be a model.
So when Tracy proposed to her, Ashley wasn't just saying yes to the man she loved. She was saying yes to a second chance.
The only roadblock in this, Sandy. Sandy could send Tracy away to prison for 10 years.
Tracy Humphrey had several arrests in his past. According to state law, if you're convicted with a battery, any subsequent battery will be a felony charge. Because of the actions he took against Sandy, he was looking at a possible, 10-year sentence in prison.
Had Ashley decided to take matters into her own hands and get rid of the problem for her new husband once and for all? To catch a killer, detectives hatch a risky plan. But if it fails, they could have another murder victim on their hands.
He could have snapped my neck in a matter of seconds.
Tampa detectives have a new suspect in the brutal murder of Sandy Rozzo. 20-year-old Ashley Humphrey, whose alibi was disproven when her cell phone registered activity close to the scene of the crime.
The cell phone records quite neatly show Ashley leaving and going mobile right after Sandra clocks out of work. and in essence following her over into Pinellas County. The very next call she makes, which is right after the homicide, initiates off a cell tower in Pinellas Park, not far from where the homicide occurred. It opened up our eyes to the fact that she may have actually been directly involved with the murder. But also, there's more work to be done.
If Ashley did kill Sandy, was she acting alone, or had someone else been pulling the strings? To find out, investigators come up with a dangerous plan.
Toby agreed and consented to wear a recording device on her person, trying to elicit information from Ashley and Tracy regarding the homicide.
It's especially risky because Tracy is already suspicious that Toby is working with police.
He became very paranoid, wasn't sleeping, wasn't trusting people.
With Tracy being that paranoid, of course he's going to be worried that Toby's going to drop a dime, as they say, on him at any time.
He had also gotten in the habit of hugging me recently. I know he was checking for some sort of device.
When Toby meets back up with Tracy at her house, it turns out he had been trying to reach her the whole time she was with detectives. Toby covers by claiming that she didn't answer the phone because she lost it at a local store.
I had left my phone with the police just to make sure he wouldn't find it on me. The police called and said, "We found your phone at Walmart and you can come up and get it to try and get me out of the house." We went in his car. It was literally down to the second when one of the detectives got a vest on and got behind the counter and said, "Yes, we found your phone in the bathroom." I think he was relieved when my phone was there, but he still seemed very suspicious.
Despite the scare, Toby agrees to wear the wire again. On October 22nd, 2003, Toby asks Tracy and Ashley to meet her at the gym. This time, police have also set up surveillance cameras.
We came up with a fake subpoena to try and get him upset because I figured the best chance to get Tracy to say something by mistake was to get him mad.
The document was simply a subpoena for her to appear before the state attorney's office and give a statement.
Cell phone records indicated that she was in Pinellas County at the time of the killing.
That was one thing that I hope wasn't true.
It showed like 2 or 3 times it was bouncing off Pinellas Park towers, and one of them was right about when she was killed.
Tracy was very, very concerned about the investigation. He was very frightened. He was very afraid.
He started writing down on each side of a piece of paper, one for me and one for Ashley, what she was supposed to say and what I was supposed to say. Then he said, "I want you to read all this and memorize it and then destroy it."
That surveillance video is very telling. Their reactions to that and the statements they make during that night are not directly incriminating, but enough that the state attorney felt at that point they could bring it to a grand jury.
But that's not all. Detectives also get a lead about a possible murder weapon from Ashley's mother's boyfriend.
He says that he had given her a handgun that she asked for her safety. He provided Ashley with a .22 caliber Ruger semi-automatic handgun that uses rimfire cartridges, which were the same caliber and style that we found at the crime scene.
He tells police that Ashley never returned the gun. Tracy already seems to have a sufficient motive. He was facing jail time from Sandy's rape allegations. And while digging deeper into Tracy's recent activities, detectives also find charges on Tracy's credit card from a shooting range. Workers verify that he had been there with Ashley.
He was at that gun range teaching Ashley how to shoot that weapon.
Because Tracy had previous felony convictions, he violated not only state but federal law by being in possession of a firearm and ammunition.
There was no smoking gun. There was no one piece of evidence that linked Tracy to this homicide. However, because he is a convicted felon and we've had witnesses that told us he did possess the firearm, he did load it, and he was helping Ashley fire it, that gave us enough probable cause to arrest him for being a felon in possession of a firearm.
On December 18th, 2003, 8 squad cars pull into the parking lot of the gym where Ashley and Tracy are working.
We arrested her, charged her with first-degree murder.
Tracy was being charged with some federal weapon possession charges.
Once I got the call that they had been arrested, I was ecstatic. I really felt like I was safe for the first time in a very long time.
Tracy continues to deny any involvement, and Ashley appears ready to stand by her man.
She refused to talk. She stated she wanted to have a lawyer.
Do you understand what you're being arrested for?
This is the murder of a woman that I don't know.
Okay. The indictment was handed down for you for the first-degree homicide of Sandra Razzo. Okay?
Get my turn.
What do you mean, get him?
I mean, bring him here.
For what reason?
Because I'm not speaking. I didn't do this. I'm not speaking without my attorney.
She's in love with Tracy. You're not going to break her.
She's like, yeah, my husband used to be on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, big star in Iowa State University football player, a model. And investigators said, wait a minute. Your husband is none of those things. Your husband is a violent felon.
Ashley finds out that everything Tracy ever told her is a lie. Ashley's world came crashing down.
Coming up, Ashley decides to cooperate with police, and the story she tells is astonishing.
Ashley had tried to kill Sandy once before.
Ashley and Tracy Humphrey have been arrested for the murder of Sandy Razzo. Investigators believe Ashley's motivation had been to keep her husband out of jail. But now she's discovered that everything Tracy told her is a lie.
He presented himself as a former professional football player, as an underwear model, when in reality, he had a huge, lengthy criminal past, known to abuse several women.
She realized that whole relationship she had with Tracy was an affront, and she started realizing that she had been used. He thought that once he married Ashley, she would never testify against him because she wouldn't be able to legally. What the law says is we can't use verbal communications that you make with a husband or a wife during that marriage. However, actions can always be talked about. And of course, she could testify to everything that took place prior to that wedding.
And after speaking with attorneys, that's exactly what Ashley has decided to do.
Ashley's attorneys came to us and said she was willing to talk. We allowed her to plead to second-degree murder, and her sentence was 25-year minimum mandatory sentence. Tracy had convinced Ashley that he was innocent, that she was a scorned lover who was making up this incident, and that he had nothing to do with a sexual assault. Sandy was going to prevent him and her from living happily ever after. She believed in him. She loved him.
Ashley tells detectives that on the night of the murder, Tracy made her wait for Sandy outside the Green Iguana with a plan to ambush her.
So on July 5th, she was watching Sandy's place of employment for numerous hours. Sandy left her work at the Green Iguana in Tampa. She got into her vehicle, and Ashley followed Sandy from Tampa over to her home in Pinellas Park. Ashley told us she parked right in front of their driveway. The garage door didn't even have time to go down. She walked up to the driver's side of the vehicle. Sandy was still in the driver's seat. She just turned the car off, and Ashley just started shooting into the car, and she shot a number of rounds from outside the vehicle into the vehicle, striking Sandy.
Ashley says she fired without hesitation, and the reason why stuns everyone in the room.
Ashley had tried to kill Sandy once before. It was a bombshell.
On the night of Memorial Day weekend, there was an attempt on Sandy's life.
Ashley says that on the previous attempt, Tracy sent her to the Green Iguana with a rifle.
She stayed in that car all day. When Sandra came out, she leveled that rifle across the parking lot at her, looked through a scope, pulled the trigger, the gun went off, Ashley shot through the passenger side mirror of her car. Sandra looked around like she heard a noise and then got in her car and left.
Having shot their own car mirror, Tracy had gone to extreme lengths to get rid of the evidence.
She goes back to Tracy after this attempt, and it was a failure, and he's upset, and they have to go into sort of a cover-up mode.
So Ashley tells us they make their way over to another part of Tampa to purchase gas cans. Later on that night, the car is burned with gasoline down to the wheels.
To prove she's telling the truth, Ashley takes police to the scene of the first shooting.
Sure enough, guess what we found? Buried inside of a motel door there, a slug. That slug that matched the firearm that she was utilizing when she attempted the killing of Sandy at that time.
She also shows investigators where they buried the gun she used to kill Sandy.
We went out to this remote location with her and found the murder weapon. The handgun was put in a plastic bag and buried, and that was so at some point she could give it back to her mom's boyfriend.
Ashley was relieved, but she was a defeated woman. She knew she was taken advantage of. She knew she was manipulated. She just came across, as a matter of fact, she came across believable.
She was detailing everything for us and what he had to benefit from it, but certainly didn't shy away from the fact that she was complicit in the murder and what she did. Her confidence level in making a case on him was exponentially better after she talked to us.
Police finally have the evidence they need to charge Tracy with first-degree murder.
We actually went over to Hillsborough County, where he was still being held in jail, and informed him that he was being charged with these new charges. He will be transferred from Hillsborough County to Pinellas County to face trial.
But prosecutors nearly lose their chance to convict him. On April 16, 2004, Tracy makes a daring escape from the transport van on his way to the courthouse.
Tracy is a big guy. Right, 6'3", 6'4", at the time, 225. And here's this maniac, this psychopath running around.
Police immediately lock down the surrounding area, and the manhunt begins.
He was gone for hours upon hours, out and about in the community.
Out come the sheriffs and the marshals and everything. They finally track him to like a marsh, and he's coiled like a snake around a tree with some brush over him.
With Tracy back in custody, his trial is set to begin. However, the outcome is still anything but certain.
I thought he was the greatest guy in the world for over 2 years. So, of course, if you put him on the stand, he can convince other people of that. I was dreading the trial because I didn't know what the outcome would be.
Coming up, would this con artist be able to pull the wool over the jury's eyes as well?
He had no idea that she was going to do this. He wasn't there. He didn't pull the trigger.
Tracy Humphrey faces the death penalty in the murder of Sandy Razzo. His wife Ashley has already confessed and taken a plea deal to testify against him.
You would have a husband and wife essentially testifying against each other. And the fact that you had an older man with a history of deception who was able to get a young woman to marry him one day, kill for him the next. That's just so unusual.
I think we felt pretty good about the case we had against him. In my mind, it really hinged on their ability to believe Ashley.
On February 14th, 2006, almost 2.5 years after Sandy's murder, Tracy's trial begins.
The trial starts on Valentine's Day. I found it quite ironic. This was all about love, right?
Prosecutors describe him as a violent criminal who used his wife to take vengeance against Sandy for accusing him of rape.
Tracy Humphrey had convinced Ashley that he was being wrongly accused by a girlfriend that was jealous. Tracy was saying, I can't go to prison. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I love you. She's lying.
He was very manipulative. She became enamored with him and for whatever reason seemed to be very subservient to what he wanted.
To keep suspicion off himself, Tracy directed Ashley to take care of all of the details.
He's got that type of street smart that he feels he can beat the system. He was thinking that nothing would come back to him.
Ashley had received a firearm from her mother's boyfriend.
Ashley tells the jury that after her first failed attempt, Tracy sent her back with a warning not to mess it up this time.
And when Sandy Rozo left the bar, she followed over the bridge and into Pinellas County.
So Sandy Rozo pulled into her garage. The door was still up. Before she could even get out of the vehicle, Ashley shot numerous rounds into the vehicle. And ultimately into Sandy Rozo, killing her.
She says Tracy even coached her on what to do afterward.
Tracy had told Ashley, make sure that you get the job done. You don't want her waking up on the hospital bed telling what happened. You want to look in her eyes and look for a certain vacant look that will confirm that indeed she's dead.
After the shooting, she along with Tracy went out and buried the gun in the woods in Hillsborough.
The next morning, they go to the gun range and they shoot and they get gunpowder on themselves so they could explain why, if they were caught, why there was gunpowder on their hands or clothes.
I loved him very much and I did not want to lose him.
So you were willing to kill another human being because you loved him?
Yes.
He's the one that had the most to gain out of this. And where he participated in this case by helping destroy evidence and the statements that he makes along the way to her that are verifiable, it's very obvious that he was in charge.
On February 23rd, he takes the stand in his own defense.
He has a pretty solid defense on paper. He wasn't there that night. That's easily proven. He was at home.
He basically blamed Ashley Humphrey, said it was all her idea. He had no idea that she was going to do this. He wasn't there. He didn't pull the trigger. He couldn't explain away those videotapes that we had of him interacting with Toby White and Ashley. He couldn't explain the number of calls as Ashley sat there and waited for Sandy to get off work.
And you told her over and over, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, correct?
That is correct. I did say that.
Here's a character that has a lengthy criminal history. He's lied. He is accused of rape and battery and kidnapping on his ex-girlfriend. So people just didn't buy it.
On February 24th, 2006, both sides rest their cases, and less than 3 hours later, the jury returns with their verdict.
They came back with a verdict of guilty as charged, which is murder of the first degree.
I will sentence you to the Department of Corrections for the rest of your natural life. You have no possibility of parole.
I was at home when the verdict came back. It was just such a sense of relief. I'd feared all along that he would get off on this charge because he can con people. He didn't get off.
If we hadn't utilized Ashley as a witness, Tracy probably would have gotten away with murder.
This guy who has apparently gotten away with so much in his life is getting what he deserves and exactly what he didn't want, which was jail.
But while justice has been served, nothing can repay the terrible cost of his revenge.
Sandra's daughter missed out on having a mom for the rest of her life. Her mom, her sister missed her tremendously.
She was a promising young research scientist who thought she found her perfect match.
She was very well liked in the community and at work. He was like the office stud.
Their relationship was progressing. Maybe this is meant to be.
But this office romance wouldn't have a fairy tale ending.
There's bloody handprints on the walls. there's blood smeared on the floor.
The violence was so over the top that it had to have some personal connection.
The ensuing investigation would reveal that Mr. Wright wasn't as perfect as he appeared to be, and someone had decided to make him pay for it.
And I was like, is there a female serial killer? What's going on here?
The person who committed this murder had a score to settle. They chose violence. Bloody violence.
Friday, November 8th, 2002. It's a quiet afternoon in the picturesque harbor area of Stamford, Connecticut. Until 12:13 p.m., when local police receive a disturbing 911 call.
Stamford, please. Hello?
Yes, hello. A guy attacked my neighbor. I saw a guy go into her apartment.
The 911 dispatch asks her, what is your neighbor's name? She doesn't know her name, but what she does know is the number of the door.
I don't know her name, but the guy was there in the bathtub. I heard yelling.
Okay. You don't know your... Hello? Hello?
The call cuts off abruptly at that point. They don't know if she hung up, got disconnected, or if she could be in danger as well.
Officers are immediately dispatched to the apartment identified by the caller.
This is a upper-level condominium on the waterfront. They have docks there. It's a very nice neighborhood. So you're not prepared for what you're going to see when you open that door.
They enter the apartment and find the body of a dead woman inside.
The victim was lying just inside the threshold of the door, and there was a tremendous amount of blood. We felt that definitely a stabbing was involved. We could look at the victim, and even without additional information from the medical examiner, you could see a number of stab wounds about the chest and neck area.
The officers quickly secure the area and call for backup.
Considering the location, they knew this was going to be a high-profile case.
When I first got down there, there was a lot of police, and the area was taped off, and it was hard to get information. Police weren't giving anything, but I do remember a source of mine slipping me a note.
By the next morning, the victim's face is all over the news. She is a beautiful 32-year-old research scientist named Annalisa Raimundo.
Annalisa Raimundo was born to Filipino parents who immigrated into this country. Wonderful people. Her father was a doctor. Mother was a professional.
She was just a go-getter, came from a family with very high standards. And I think not only did they want the best for her, but she fought to have the best for herself. Attended Harvard, attended Columbia for graduate school, and just kind of the apple of her parents' eye.
After finishing her degrees, Annalisa could have pursued a career anywhere in the country, but she decided to stay in Connecticut.
She had her pick, and she chose to go into pharmaceutical research, and she was one of the best at her job.
She worked at Purdue Pharma, this big company right downtown Stamford.
She wanted to help people and make the world a better place, but pharmaceuticals are also big business. By her late 20s, she had made enough money to buy herself a condo in Chapon.
She was just climbing the ranks and making a wonderful life for herself.
Annalisa's devotion to her job left little time for relationships, so it wasn't surprising that she fell in love with a coworker.
So while working at Purdue Pharma, she met a man by the name of Nelson Sessler, who worked there as well.
He was tall, handsome, and he was like the office stud, and everybody had a crush on him.
They started out as friends and then began dating casually at first.
But by the summer of 2002, the romance between Annalisa and Nelson had become more serious.
Their relationship was progressing. He was spending the night quite a bit at her condo.
Employees definitely knew them as a couple. When there was a work function, they were together. They went out together. They did dinners together.
They're making good money, and everything appeared that it was a good relationship.
For Annalisa, I mean, she really felt like this was going to be her husband, like they were going to get married.
But the couple's plans for the future would never be realized. 32-year-old Annalisa has been found murdered in her waterfront condominium, and the entire community wants to know why. Leading the investigation into this high-pressure case is Captain Richard Conklin.
The minute you enter that apartment, the crime scene is all there. Different items that had been knocked about. One of the more bloody scenes I had ever seen.
One of the first things they want to do is find the 911 caller. She had hung up so abruptly, they had to be thinking the worst, that maybe she was a victim as well.
Someone called 911, and that person who called 911 said they were a neighbor. Who is it? Well, what happens is, when they begin to send out other investigators and start looking at tracing the call, what they find is kind of strange.
We find that the call came from a payphone about a half mile from this crime scene.
If this caller's life is in danger, it would make sense for her to get away and call from someplace safe. But if she had done so, why didn't she just say that?
They alleged that they were a witness to this disturbance. And, these are the things that were racing through our mind. Why didn't this person identify themselves?
I think there were some red flags that immediately went up at that point.
Immediately, we had to come up to speed very quickly. Who was this victim? What were we dealing with? Who might have done this to her?
Coming up, crime scene investigation reveals clues about the killer.
Stabbing someone is a crime of passion. You have to have some real deep feelings to kill someone that maliciously.
Under intense media scrutiny, Connecticut police have begun an investigation into the murder of 32-year-old research scientist Annalisa Raimundo.
We're knocking on doors, we're doing computerized checks as to that residence. Has there been different disturbance calls there? Have they called for police services prior? All these are going on at one time and very, very rapidly.
Mind you, this is still early in the afternoon on a workday, so many of her neighbors weren't home. The few that were home reported hearing nothing.
The 911 call has been traced to a nearby payphone, but the caller's identity is still unknown.
We send people to process this area. At that time, they didn't have security cameras trained on that outside payphone. It's difficult to get straight up fingerprints off of it because there's so many people handling these payphones back at that point.
Police canvass the other businesses in the area, hoping someone saw the caller, but they come up empty-handed. Meanwhile, a team of forensic specialists is busy processing the condominium for evidence.
I can't really describe how frantic you are in the beginning of a high-level homicide like this and the number of tasks you're undertaking at one time. Soon after seeing this scene, I made a decision, and it's one I've only made a couple times in my entire career. We decided to call in the state police major crime unit. DNA was just starting to be a wonderful tool for law enforcement. And when we saw what a bloody crime scene this was, we really wanted to preserve the scene. And you only get one chance, one shot at processing a crime scene. If you don't do it well, you lose the evidence.
What they would have seen standing from the foyer, basically, is a female victim who appears to be 25 to 35. Long black hair, kind of lying on the ground. There's bloody handprints on the walls, and there's blood smeared on the floor.
There was no forced entry. The lock was in good shape. It hadn't been tampered with. So you have to think that perhaps someone knocked or rang the doorbell and our victim answered the door and then either allowed someone entry or someone kind of pushed their way through at that point. And then it looked like just immediately a life and death struggle took place.
Annalisa's injuries provide a terrifying summary of the attack.
It was a very violent struggle. There was glass broken. Annalisa was smashed over the head with an object and also stabbed several times in the face and neck, chest.
Stabbing someone is a crime of passion. You have to be angry with someone or have some real deep feelings to kill someone that maliciously. And she was stabbed 9 times.
The dumbbell on the ground has hair and it has blood on it. So they know that that dumbbell was used in this crime in some way.
Annalisa's skull had been fractured by a heavy blow, and she had been stabbed a total of 9 times to the face, neck, and chest. One of the stab wounds had even reached the back of her lung. Thankfully, there was no sign of sexual assault.
No, this was a prolonged attack, but whatever edged knife or weapon was used was not left at the scene. We could not locate that in that area.
Further inspection also reveals a trail of blood leading away from the body.
You can see bloody footprints and smudges going all the way to the bathroom. So for investigators, that bathroom becomes a focal point.
There was some blood, a droplet of blood, as they described it, on the sink handle in the bathroom there near the entryway.
We kind of felt that someone might have washed up there because it would be odd, to find that blood on that fixture like that.
Police are hopeful the DNA will help identify Annalisa's killer. But what prompted the attack?
You make some assessments as you're going along. Could someone had attempted to burglarize this location and didn't realize that she was home? As we look through the apartment, there's so many valuables left around. The place isn't ransacked.
There's silverware, there's computers, there's TVs. There's still money in her pocketbook.
I felt that the violence was so over the top that it almost had to have some personal connection to it.
And police quickly learned there was no one closer to Annalisa than her boyfriend, Nelson.
We started contacting friends and family. We were talking to neighbors, and we were able to make that she was in a relationship with Nelson Sessler. So immediately, that's put on our to-do list.
Coming up, a loving boyfriend or a cold-blooded killer?
I've seen people on scenes drop to their knees screaming and crying in disbelief that someone is dead. Why is this guy not completely distraught?
Hours after finding Annalisa Raimundo murdered in her luxury condominium, investigators have a potential suspect, her boyfriend, Nelson Sessler.
You're looking at domestic partners, especially such a violent crime like this, and you realize that you want to make contact immediately because such a violent, bloody crime scene, there's no way that there wasn't transfer of blood to the attacker.
But before officers can even begin searching for him, Nelson unexpectedly shows up at the crime scene.
Up pulls this guy, and he wants to know what's going on in that condominium. Why do you want to know? That's my girlfriend/fiance in there.
There was, no bloody clothing, no scratch marks on his face.
But that doesn't necessarily mean anything. They know the killer used the bathroom sink to wash the blood off, so now they're really interested to see what Nelson has to say.
He said they were already engaged or they were about to get engaged, but they were definitely becoming more serious and they were talking about marriage and they had a very good relationship.
They tell him, that his fiancée has been the victim of a homicide, and they were struck by his reaction. It wasn't a typical grief or grieving type of action. It was very emotionless.
If I'm told my fiance was just murdered, I'm gonna lose it. Nelson doesn't shed a tear. He kind of bows his head a little bit and sits there, and he's kind of like, oh, geez, golly, I can't believe this happened.
Despite his strange reaction, Nelson denies having anything to do with Annalisa's death.
According to Nelson, the last time he saw her was the morning he was leaving for work. He said they'd made plans to get together again that night.
She moved to another company in New Jersey. She was working from home a lot, traveling back and forth to New Jersey.
He and Annalisa were supposed to go into the city to have drinks with a friend from Purdue Pharma.
While police try to verify Nelson's story, his attitude does little to reduce their suspicions.
They want to keep this guy contained. So they keep him in this lounge. And as they're going through the crime scene, they come back to him. He's sleeping.
This guy was so laid back. Yeah, my girlfriend was just killed, but I'm going to go take a nap.
They ask him for a DNA sample, which he voluntarily gives up, but the way he's acting is sending all kinds of red flags.
But when investigators contact the pharmaceutical company, they confirm his alibi.
The good thing about Purdue Pharma is they have a very extensive security system with cameras and a badge type of check-in.
They were able to look at that time frame when this murder happened and see that Nelson was indeed at work, as he said.
He had a very rock-solid alibi at that point that he was not the killer.
With Nelson no longer a suspect, detectives turn their attention back to the missing female 911 caller.
They asked Nelson if there were any women that he could think of that would want to hurt Annalisa. No one immediately comes to mind, but he does give police the name of two former girlfriends who both suffered from depression.
Investigators quickly rule out both women, as well as the rest of Annalisa's family.
They weren't anywhere near the condo at the time of the murder, and they didn't have a motive, but police did take a DNA sample just in case.
We're doing meticulous work, but we really don't have anything that we're really locked into.
You start to look at, well, what's going on in this area of the condominium? Well, one thing they find out is a lot of the yachts parked near there are burgled. And they start looking at some of the people arrested for those crimes.
Anyone that was arrested in the city of Stamford was being debriefed. Do they know anything about this? There was a great deal of frustration that we weren't making great headway in this investigation.
Detectives' best hope for a lead comes from the DNA tests performed on the blood found in Annalisa's bathroom.
The DNA hit comes back on a mixture of both our victim and another person's DNA. And again, you start looking for elimination, like you look for elimination fingerprints.
They compared that sample to the exemplars they had with everyone they had talked to so far. As suspected, it didn't match Nelson or the victim's family.
They submit that blood into CODIS, into all the systems, but comes up negative. If that person hadn't been arrested before, it's not going to pop up.
It would either give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to any suspects that we developed later in this investigation. So it was certainly something we were very happy about and hopeful.
But when months go by without any new developments in the case, those hopes begin to wane.
There is no one left to interview at this point, and they still need more information on this mysterious 911 caller. It's like the investigation just comes to a halt at this point.
You're just waiting for something to come in. It eats you up inside because you want answers for the family. You want justice.
Coming up, news of another stabbing provides investigators with the break they've been looking for.
And I was like, is there a female serial killer? What, what's going on here?
After 5 months of investigation into the murder of Annalisa Raimundo, Connecticut police seem to have reached a dead end. But on March 23, 2003, an incident in nearby New York changes that.
I remember I came in the office and my editor was saying, you need to look into this. There was a stabbing in Westchester County, and someone called and said they think it's related to Annalise's death.
Westchester Medical Center, Sunday night, some hospital employees were out on their break, and they hear a scuffle in the car park.
It's dark and they can't be sure what they're seeing, but it appears to be a man and a woman who are engaged in a physical altercation.
A security guard intervened, separated the two, and they called the police.
The man was bleeding heavily from 3 stab wounds to the chest. Luckily, they were right outside of an emergency room, and he was able to be treated immediately.
They got the suspect, who was the wife, in, and the Westchester authorities started questioning her. They felt that they had an attempt at murder here.
The victim's name is Paul Christos. His wife is 33-year-old Sheila Davalu. Sheila tells investigators that she and Paul had met as fellow students at New York Medical College in 1994, before getting married in May of 2000.
They were rising up the ranks of their careers in college, getting master's degrees, doctorates, and they were good together.
Sheila claims they have it all wrong. She was trying to help her husband, not hurt him.
What time was it when he came home?
I didn't notice him at first. I was playing with the dog, and then he came and he said he's hurt, and he laid on the floor, and he's like, "Can you look at it, see if it's bleeding?" I saw the wounds in his chest.
So was there blood around his body?
There's definitely a lot of blood.
Sheila claims they decided it would take too long for an ambulance to arrive, so she drove Paul to the hospital.
If she and Paul weren't fighting in the parking lot, then what were they doing when the security guard had to separate them? And why did she take the time to park the car at all?
Sheila, I have to be honest with you. I found it odd.
The whole thing is odd.
Meanwhile, doctors have stabilized Paul's condition. The first thing he does is ask to speak to police.
Paul Christos is a strong guy. I mean, here's a guy who was stabbed 3 times, punctured lung, bled profusely, but he's talking. He wants to tell his story.
Their marriage had not apparently been doing well for a while. They were both academics, but they were kind of living separate lives. He was continuing on with school. She had this career.
Paul says that when he came home earlier that day, Sheila suggested they try something new to reignite their relationship.
He was still trying to work on this marriage, so when he's, hearing, okay, we're going to play a sex game, he's, all in for it.
He describes some game he was playing with his wife, whereby they would blindfold each other and they would rub different objects on each other, and the blindfolded person had to guess what the object was. He describes how he was blindfolded, tied to a chair, and his wife is rubbing objects on him, and all of a sudden he just feels this kind of thrust, this sharp pain in his chest. And he tells her, "Please take the blindfold off. What's going on here?" And he looks down and he sees blood. His wife says, "Oh, it was a candle, and there must have been some piece of metal sticking out of the bottom of the candle, and it cut you or something." He buys that, I guess.
Paul's still in love with Sheila, and I think the fact that he's willing to still believe her despite how badly he's injured is a testament to that.
He's like, "Okay, but I'm kind of losing blood and I'm getting dizzy. Call 911. He's in the chair listening to his wife as she describes, "My husband is hurt, he's bleeding, and we need an ambulance here." They wait.
Paul says they waited for what seemed like a very long time, but the ambulance never showed up.
He begs his wife, "Put me in the car, take me to the ER." He's in the back seat. She pulls into the hospital parking lot and pulls around back. He's like, "What's going on?" She gets out of the car, comes over, opens the passenger door in the back. She has a knife in her hand. She begins to attack him.
she stabs him again. And thank goodness those hospital employees were out there and heard what was going on.
Now he knows something. He knows it wasn't a candle. His wife blindfolded him, strapped him to a chair, and then stabbed him.
Investigators confront Sheila with her husband's testimony, but she denies trying to kill him.
She admits to using a knife in their sex game, but she insists that she never meant to hurt Paul.
How could you put a knife into somebody's chest by accident? Paul said you would say it again. On the way to the hospital.
But when detectives search the hospital parking lot, they find two damning pieces of evidence.
They find a bloody kitchen knife and Sheila's cell phone, which she dropped during the struggle. When they search her call history, it's easy to see she's been lying to them.
Sheila Davalu never called 911 for an ambulance. She never dialed the number.
Instead, she called someone else in Stanford, and there were voicemails from that same number in return.
It's a guy who is traveling down to Westchester County in order to meet Sheila that night for dinner and spend the weekend. So it's clear that she has a lover, and that man's name is Nelson Sessler.
Coming up, detectives in New York and Connecticut join forces to solve the murder of Annalisa Raimundo.
I think that he needed a shoulder to cry on, and so she kind of played into that. He was vulnerable.
New York police suspect 33-year-old Sheila Davalu tried to kill her husband and make it look like an accident. But they're about to discover she's also connected to a different stabbing.
She's been arrested and charged in New York at this point, and they know she's been having an affair with a man named Nelson, and they want to find out if he's involved as well.
So an investigator makes the 45-minute drive from Westchester to Stamford.
She heads up to Stamford, Connecticut, knocks on the door to his apartment. No answer. Knocks again. No answer.
A neighbor hears the commotion and comes outside, and they just want to know if they found who murdered Nelson's fiancée yet.
Well, what are you talking about, murder? And so she pieces together right there that there's a murder in Stamford, and now she has a man stabbed in Westchester County, and that somehow these could be connected.
She immediately contacts the detectives investigating Annalisa's murder. Hours later, Nelson Sessler is brought in for more questioning.
Whether he was complicit or not is something we needed to find out. You know, the oddity of this attack, the oddity and the timing of this phone call.
Nelson says all three of them worked at Purdue Pharma together. He briefly dated Sheila before he met Annalisa, but it was pretty casual, and that's why he hadn't mentioned her before.
Sheila and Nelson had started seeing each other in 2001, but the relationship wasn't exclusive.
Nelson, is kind of casually dating Sheila Davalu at this point and starts to casually date Annalisa Raimundo.
Until he got serious with Annalisa, and then that relationship ceased.
Nelson claims he and Sheila had broken things off in 2002. He also admits that for the past 2 months, he had been seeing Sheila again, but claims the affair hadn't begun until 2 months after Annalisa was killed.
He was trying to get over the death of Annalisa, and I think that he needed a shoulder to cry on, and so she kind of played into that.
Nelson said that Sheila had reached out to him with a care package full of cookies and things like that. Then the next weekend, she invited him on a ski trip with some friends from work, but when he got there, it was just the two of them.
Either he's really gullible or she's really smart. Maybe a little bit of both, but he, fell right into her trap and kind of rekindled their relationship.
Nelson also claims he had no idea Sheila was married.
She worked at Purdue Pharma in Stamford, Connecticut. The one thing Sheila didn't mention at Purdue Pharma was that she had a husband in Westchester County. She never told anyone about that.
Nelson told police he had slept over her house several times, but he never saw any signs of anyone else living there.
When investigators follow up with Sheila's husband, they find out why.
He goes into a lengthy story about her having supposedly a disabled brother who would come and visit for the weekend.
Sheila says, if my brother finds out I'm married to you, he's going to get really upset. He's very possessive that way. Paul felt sorry for her and for him.
It's hard to believe, but he would clean out anything that would link him to the apartment. Any pictures, clothes. He would go and stay with friends or in a hotel.
Sheila would then have Nelson Sessler come over and sleep with him all weekend while Paul was at a hotel.
In retrospect, it's easy for Paul to see his wife's deception, but he says it didn't stop there.
Sheila, she had this whole story that she would tell Paul all the time, about her friends at work, Melissa and Jack and Lisa, and how it was a love triangle. She'd go home at night at the end of the day and say to Paul, I feel so bad for my friend Melissa. How can I help her? She's really put out. She's really heartbroken because Jack is interested in this other woman. What do I do?
Paul at one point had an interest in becoming an FBI agent. He had had some training and even some law enforcement equipment like night vision goggles. He gave them to Sheila so she could help her friend. Of course, there is no friend. The relationship she's worried about is the one between Nelson and Annalisa.
And it was at that time, really, when Sheila Davalu began stalking Nelson, using night vision goggles, following him.
Once this came into focus, the level of obsession that Sheila had with Nelson and the different means that she would pursue him, it really became apparent that she wanted to take out the competition.
When you look back at it, it's absolutely frightening.
Nelson has already been cleared of any involvement in Annalisa's murder, and it's now clear to Stamford police that Sheila had plenty of motive to kill Annalisa. But did she have the opportunity?
We know Purdue Pharma has a wonderful security system and that she worked there on that day. Was she working at this time?
What we see is Sheila Davalu taking a long lunch on the day that Annalisa Raimondo was murdered. And during the time that the 911 call's made. So here's the opportunity.
We played the call for so many of her family and associates, and there were a number of them that said, that's absolutely Sheila.
The only thing left is to tie her to the crime scene, and that's where the DNA comes in. They already have samples from Annalisa's apartment, and if Sheila is a match, that's pretty much ball game.
The lab results come back with a conclusive match for Sheila's DNA. Now, in addition to the attempted murder of her husband, she is also charged with the murder of Annalisa Raimondo. Coming up, Sheila puts her defense in the hands of the only person she trusts, herself.
She believes these grandiose thoughts of herself that I can talk my way out of this. Everybody's going to believe me.
In February of 2004, Sheila Davalu faces trial in New York for the attempted murder of her husband, Paul Christos.
Prosecutors not only have the weapon and the eyewitnesses at the hospital, they also have Paul's direct testimony.
Paul was a very good witness. He was very forthcoming. The attack at the hospital kind of locked into his mind that this was an attempt on his life.
He had these loving feelings for her, so it was very upsetting for him to know that the woman he married tried to kill him.
The jury was sympathetic towards Paul, and the evidence was very strong. Sheila was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to 25 years in prison.
Sheila serves nearly 10 years of her sentence before she is finally tried for the murder of Annalisa Raimondo.
There's no statute of limitations on homicide or murder, so we had all the time in the world.
Sheila's second trial begins on January 24th, 2012. Connecticut prosecutors argue that Sheila murdered Annalisa for the same reason she tried to kill her husband.
It was all about her obsession with Nelson Sessler. She wanted him more than anything, but the feeling was not mutual.
I think Sheila saw it as a relationship, whereas Nelson saw it as someone to sleep with.
The jealous rage comes into play. We spoke about the overkill on the assault, the number of stab wounds, the bludgeoning.
In addition to her husband's testimony, the state also has strong evidence to support their case.
If Sheila Davalu didn't murder Annalisa Raimondo, why is her blood in Annalisa Raimondo's condominium? And that 911 call comes back up.
Sheila definitely attempted to disguise her voice in that call. As years went on, and we had the luxury of time in this case, the technology exploded in voice recognition, and we had experts again look into it, and they say, yes, that's definitely her voice.
So, the question always asked is, why did Sheila Davalu call 911 and not just go back to work? She's an ultimate narcissist. She cannot help herself from thinking that she can put the pawns in place to get away with something.
When the time comes for Sheila's defense, she surprises everyone by deciding to represent herself.
For as smart as this woman is, and the time she had spent studying, she just kind of fell flat on her face with the cross-examination. She seemed nervous. She seemed at many times like she didn't know where to go next with the questioning. The judge was very often frustrated with the situation, overrule what she was saying.
Her only hope was to try and discredit the evidence against her. She asked the jury if they thought her voice sounded anything like the one on the 911 tape. She also called the DNA results into question.
She felt that it was a mistake, or perhaps something that, we had orchestrated.
She also tried to use the New York conviction as proof she was incapable of committing murder. If she were the one to kill Annalisa, then it stood to reason that she would have been able to finish the job with her own husband, especially since he was tied up and blindfolded.
With Annalisa, there was rage. She went to her house, got in, there was a big struggle. I think with Paul, it was like, she had these mixed feelings. She was stabbing him, but yet she was helping him. She was stabbing him, but yet she was putting him in the car and taking him to the hospital.
On February 10th, 2012, the jury announces their verdict.
Sheila was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to an additional 50 years in prison.
To hear that verdict and just a sense of relief and, really feeling good for the family that, in a bad situation, we had given them some amount of closure here. We had ascertained the truth in this investigation.
A scorned lover's need for revenge had torn apart several lives and ended the future of a promising young woman.
I have this vision in my head of either the doorbell or a knock at the door, and Annalisa looking through the peephole and seeing Sheila Davalu and kind of being quizzical, like, oh, that's odd, but recognize her and really feeling no threat.
That's the sad part, that she opened the door for someone that she thought was a friend or, someone that she knew, and let them into her home.
Sheila Davalu is really the ultimate narcissist. Still to this day, she'll tell you I had nothing to do with it. She even says, I will pray for Annalisa and her family. She's going to pray for the woman she murdered. That's a sociopath, and that's Sheila Davalu.
He was a savvy entrepreneur who'd made millions in real estate.
He was sort of a wheeler dealer, my dad's business. It was some amazing stuff. He really had a gift for that.
They were sort of living the life.
Anything and everything he could want.
But sometimes everything isn't enough.
There was blood all over the floor.
There was glass everywhere.
It's up to investigators to determine, did the millionaire pull the trigger? Or was he the victim of greed and revenge?
She's been taken for a fool.
He was the sole heir as the sole child.
Is there some type of conspiracy here?
Friday, September 30th, 2011. It's a quiet morning in the wealthy seaside town of Jupiter, Florida.
You have some very elite and exclusive communities that are big dollar communities in Jupiter. A full range of mega mansions.
But while most of Jupiter's well-heeled residents are still getting ready for work, a security guard responds to an alarm at the home of real estate developer Lanny Horowitz, his wife Donna, and their son Radley.
Admirals Cove is a private community. It's got an exclusive golf club in it, and they have from townhomes all the way up to the super mansions in there.
It's on the water. It's a strictly gated community. It's monitored. The alarm system from the house would ring through to the gate.
And in this residence, there's multiple glass break alarms, which activate when there's vibration, the sound amplitude. In this case, 3 glass break alarms are what tripped the alarm.
The security guard comes to the home. Radley's the one who's, at the door with him, and he describes Radley as being a person who's, groggy, a person when you just encounter them when they're waking up.
He must have been just driving by on a patrol because, he was there incredibly fast. And I let him in the front door, and he went into the bathroom where my dad was.
The shower was running. There was blood all over the floor and the walls.
The glass was on the ground and scattered throughout the room.
On the bathroom floor, covered in blood, is a man the guard recognizes as 66-year-old Lanny Horowitz.
You can see one bullet wound on his side.
He describes, unfortunately, the gargling that we often see when people are very close to death, when they're gasping for air.
As Lanny draws his last breath, the guard rushes to call for help.
Yeah, this is Admiral Security calling in to get you a dead person.
Lanny Horowitz's road to success began in Buffalo, New York.
My father got involved with his father at a young age with real estate. He apparently took to real estate like a fish to water.
Lanny was sort of a wheeler dealer, real estate guy, always kind of looking for the next big real estate deal.
But while real estate was Lanny's passion, his first love was his wife, Donna.
My father was 15 and my mom was 14 at the time. As my father told me, he saw my mom coming down the stairs for the first time at his friend's house. And he knew right then that was the girl he wanted to marry.
She was a very beautiful woman. She was very stunning.
She was very caring and compassionate, but a strong woman.
They hit it off, and the rest is history.
The couple married in 1967, while Lanny was working his way through law school.
He never practiced law, but it was a huge help because when you're a developer, the joke is you're basically a professional defendant.
As Lanny started his professional career, he and Donna started a family.
I was born in 1974. I just remember a lot of snow and a big yard.
Radley was the only child of Donna and Lanny Horowitz.
A few years after Radley's birth, the family left Buffalo behind.
I was 3 years old when a blizzard of 77 hit, and Both my parents and a lot of other people at the time decided it was time to go someplace south, a little sunnier, and as my father used to say, where the weather won't kill you. And then we wound up moving to Jupiter, Florida.
They live right on the water. There's full water access to the yacht club, and it's got an exclusive golf club. It's a beautiful community.
In the Sunshine State, Lanny set to work building his real estate empire.
He sort of had his hands in a lot of different pots. He was a businessman. You had cars and real estate, and Lanny had money. They were sort of living the life.
But now, Lanny Horowitz's life has come to a sudden, horrific end.
The call came out initially of a possible shooting incident which had occurred in Admiral's Cove.
It was like something out of a movie, just, police and fire trucks and everything. And my mom and I are standing out in the driveway.
While Radley and Donna wait, investigators take stock of the bloody scene inside the mansion's master bath.
The scene is going to tell you what happened in this residence. So we take our time to observe and see what you have and digest what you have and see, is this what it's telling us, or is there something a little bit more to it?
There were no shell casings, and I did see a revolver. It had been moved by one of the security guys. So when he came in to do life-saving techniques, he moved the gun away.
The revolver was initially either near or in Mr. Horowitz's hand.
So the first officers that arrived from the Jupiter Police Department thought that they were responding to a suicide call.
But does the evidence tell a different story?
There's a shower to the right, and there's an obvious bullet impact through the glass door.
Lanny was shot inside that shower. There was blood pattern, cast-off spatter inside the shower. The shower glass had a white towel hanging over it.
You can see a hole through the towel that correlates to the center of where the bullet went through the glass door.
I knew right away it wasn't a suicide. There's no way he would have been able to shoot himself while he's in the shower from outside the shower.
We definitely have a crime scene.
Coming up, was a killer lurking inside Lanny's home?
He told us that it was a tumultuous relationship.
Police in Jupiter, Florida have just found millionaire real estate developer Lanny Horowitz shot dead in his waterfront villa.
Just the fact that a crime occurred there is shocking. A burglary there would be shocking.
The community where this case took place, Admiral's Cove, is a very, very affluent community.
There are numerous amount of gated communities, multi-million-dollar homes.
You're looking at Jaguars, Porsches.
But now, police are looking at a murder.
It was readily apparent that this couldn't have been a suicide.
The bullet came from outside the shower. We don't have a suicide here anymore. We have potentially a homicide here.
Investigators also realized that Lanny had suffered multiple gunshot wounds.
There was so much blood, we couldn't see all of the holes in him until the medical examiner came and started flipping him over and doing what he does. That's when we noticed that there were many bullet holes in his body.
When the blood and the glass are removed and they see where there are 10 shots.
And we knew that the gun that was closest to him in the hallway couldn't have been the only gun unless there had been a reload, because it had a 5-shot capacity.
That's when we started looking for the other firearm.
As you're looking at those 2 bathroom doors, if you take a jog to the left, you then enter into the actual master bedroom, which was, the second gun was actually back down in the bedroom on the dresser.
The second revolver also holds 5 rounds.
It's 2 5-shot revolvers. All 10 shots have been fired.
The guns at the scene, along with other evidence, tell investigators Lanny's killer isn't an intruder.
There's absolutely no way someone else got into that residence. Every single window and door was sealed up.
We also knew that the alarm to the house did not go off until the first shot happened.
They call them glass break alarm, but really the concussion of the trigger being pulled tripped the alarm. And I could tell you exactly to the second when 3 of those rounds were shot.
You'd had to believe that person got into the home without tripping the alarm, committed the murder with guns that belonged specifically to Lanny and Donna, and then exited the home again without tripping the alarm. It just doesn't make sense.
All the evidence points investigators in one direction. Lanny's death was an inside job.
Which means our suspect pool is immediately limited to Donna or Radley.
When investigators approach Donna, she appears too distraught to give them a statement.
Donna's sitting in the front seat of one of their vehicles. She's got her knees up. She's kind of almost like hugging herself. And we introduce ourselves. She never speaks with us, never answers or acknowledges us.
She sort of made motions like, I can't hear you.
And they basically had no further real interaction with Donna.
Investigators are able to speak with Radley, however.
I mean, I was afraid to ask the cops anything, and I'm like, is my dad okay, you know? And one of the cops just kind of shook his head but didn't say anything, asked me a bunch of questions and stuff.
I did a gunshot residue test on him, which detects any gunshot residue if he was to have fired the gun.
Then investigators ask Radley to come down to the station for a formal statement.
I appreciate that. You coming in here and all to give a statement. He came and he brought his lawyer, which is his right, and we had no problem with that. Especially the fact that even though he's bringing his lawyer, he was still 100% open with us and spoke with us.
Although, for all his openness, what Radley tells investigators raises plenty of red flags.
They asked if my dad was abusive, I remember that.
Never physical with me. Psychologically, but just petty and nasty though,
I said, only verbally, only mentally. My dad could be a real needling prick. He had a real way about him.
He described his father as being sometimes abrasive, very short. He told us that it was a tumultuous relationship.
My dad was never warm, effusive, he used to say, I'm not a warm, effusive person.
Radley also admits that he and his father had suffered a major falling out a few years earlier, after Radley opened a gun shop near Jupiter.
I wasn't making very much money at it, but it was my passion. It was the one thing that I really, really loved. And he had given me some incredibly bad advice with the gun business.
Radley had wanted to order some kind of a kit that could transform a semi-automatic gun to an automatic gun. And according to Radley, he asked his father, who was an attorney, if he believed that it was legal, and his dad told him just order it.
I took his advice, and that did not go very well.
Radley ordered the part and ended up being arrested and convicted and got sentenced to federal prison for some short period of time. But as a result of that, he lost his ability to have the gun shop, and he lost his ability to own or be in possession of a firearm.
It was a shattering experience, to say the least.
But was it motive for murder?
He was very hurt by the firearm situation. He was still sour about that.
Radley, over and over said, hey, listen, I didn't do anything here. I didn't do anything here. I didn't have anything to do with this.
Coming up, investigators put Radley's family ties to the test.
Can't live with him, can't live without him.
Police in Jupiter, Florida, are investigating the murder of millionaire real estate developer Lanny Horowitz. And Lanny's son, Radley, has just revealed a possible motive.
What Radley told me was he blames going to prison on his dad. And then when he got in trouble, his dad was unsympathetic and basically laughed at him.
Now suspicious of Radley, investigators ask him to walk them through the events surrounding his father's death.
Let's go over again. You tell us in your words what happened that morning. There were lots of little details that he gave us of where he was in the residence, how he woke up.
He was laser focused on every act he did.
What he said was, I got up, couldn't really understand what was going on.
I heard shots, and I don't think I heard any. I pulled out earplug. Those orange ones are pretty good. And screaming. And I got out of bed, and again, I don't know how many, I can't say how many shots I heard, but, and again, if that woke me up or what.
He said, I had orange noise-canceling plugs that you commonly use at the shooting range. He said, I had those in my ear.
Even with the plugs in them, it certainly woke me up.
He said pulling the earplugs out, and that's when I heard the alarm going off. I rushed into my mom's room.
Radley tells investigators that he found Donna outside the bathroom door, apparently distraught with grief.
I just saw like my mom screaming. I went to the bedroom door, and I could see my dad.
Radley said he sees his mom right outside that master suite area screaming and saying he was so mean. He's been saying he would do this. So he assumed this is a suicide, and he said that he could see his father's body laying on the bathroom floor. He said that he then asked his mother, can I get you some water? And he went to the kitchen and got her a bottle of water and gave it to her.
After taking Radley's statement, investigators returned to Admiral's Cove.
We went back in the house to see whether or not we could corroborate some of the things that he was telling us.
Somebody tells us what happens on scene. The point is not what they tell us, but does the evidence support what they're telling us?
There was one earplug he dropped in the hallway as he's going out, and the one was right next to his bed on the bedstand.
When we went back into the bathroom, there was a water bottle on the sink.
Everything that Radley told us, you could corroborate with a piece of evidence. So immediately that tells us, okay, he's being honest.
Radley was very cooperative, answering their questions.
Donna proves far less forthcoming, though.
She didn't give an interview.
Even at the scene, she wouldn't participate and have a general conversation out in the driveway.
She never spoke with any law enforcement directly.
Does that mean Donna has something to hide? Detectives suspect her first words to Radley might contain a clue.
She was, yelling like Radley. It was either he's so horrible or he was so awful. I knew he would do this.
He took that to mean that he committed suicide. In retrospect, who knows what she meant by those words.
Hoping for answers, investigators turned to the rest of Lanny's family.
In speaking with Lanny's sisters, we were able to get all those pieces of the puzzle of their life together.
Investigators learned that behind the millionaire couple's successful facade, their marriage had been struggling for years.
Once I graduated from school, stuff started to change with them, and my mom started to change. He was just always working, and she became resentful of that. And the more and more that my father got involved with it, the more that my mother felt neglected. Was the way that he had described it to me, and my mom told me that they were getting divorced.
Donna and Lanny had been married and then divorced. Then they got remarried and divorced again.
They had first divorced in around 2000, but they got back together and remarried, and it was down at a Justice of the Peace ceremony down in Palm Beach Gardens, just down the road from Jupiter. And I went along for that and got to see my parents marry for the second time there. And then they wound up apart again.
However, it wasn't long before the couple reconciled a second time.
They did end up getting back together, and it was a lot of what you hear, just, can't live with them, can't live without them sort of thing.
At the time that this happened, Lanny had invited her into the house so that they could, according to him, be a family unit again.
The way my father announced it to me was, this weekend you'll help your mother move back into the house. And I was like, that's fantastic.
Although, according to Radley, his father had an ulterior motive: Donna's family money.
Donna's mother was very well off. Donna's father had played professional baseball and so had a good deal of money from that.
A couple of business deals hadn't come to fruition, so Lanny was sort of needing some money. The house was expensive to maintain.
She didn't see it as a loan to Lanny. She saw the money more as this is the way that they could live together in the family home.
I didn't know at that point how many mortgages were on the house in Admiral's Cove, but he convinced my mom to get $200,000 from my grandmother, and everything was pretty obvious what was going on.
This was nothing more than a ruse to get the money out of her, and she's been taken for a fool.
But did that mean Donna killed the love of her life?
It was clear that you had a woman who was angry and a woman who was fed up and finally broke.
Coming up, investigators uncover a game-changing clue.
We knew immediately that this was potentially an important piece of evidence.
Detectives investigating the murder of Florida millionaire Lanny Horowitz have narrowed their possible suspects down to two choices: the dead man's wife or his son.
Basically, we knew at that point we were dealing with, was it Radley Horowitz or Donna Horowitz?
They were the only two people in the house when Lanny was shot.
Both Radley and Donna had compelling motives to pull the trigger. But when the results of Radley's gunshot residue test come in, it suggests he's not the shooter.
Radley had no gunpowder residue on his hands.
Could it have been washed off? Potentially. But I find it very doubtful that someone's going to then, immediately after those alarms are going off and security's already on the way, they're going to go and clean up their hands.
Just to be sure, investigators return to the house and perform a luminol test.
Luminol is a chemical we use to detect small traces of blood, maybe after a cleanup. I actually did it on all the sinks in every bathroom, the kitchen, and I think there was one in the utility room that I did also.
Lanny's sink was indicating of the luminol.
Could that explain Radley's negative test for gunshot residue? Investigators expand their search, looking for additional evidence.
They didn't know what happened. Is he covering for his mom? Did they do it together? Is there some type of conspiracy here between the two?
They further went through the home and they found her journal.
This was a personal journal of Donna's, so we knew immediately that this was potentially an important piece of evidence.
The early entries in Donna's journal reveal a woman happy to rekindle her relationship with Lanny.
It's very hopeful. She talks about how he's reached out and he wants to try again.
However, after Donna returned to Admiral's Cove, the contents of her journals started to change.
It showed her progressively getting more angry and just more upset about certain situations that were occurring.
They basically become very short entries about her daily interactions with Lanny and his lies to her.
There was mention of another woman, and you can tell that Donna didn't like it.
The other woman's name was Francine Tice.
Francine was involved in the real estate industry and was working with Lanny on a few different projects. The two of them were very tight, very good friends and business associates.
She was very, very sharp, very smart, and very much a type A, personality, a go-getter, much like my dad.
It developed into a very close personal relationship.
There was some suggestion that she was a mistress. We didn't really have any evidence to suggest that it was sexual or romantic in nature.
Francine vehemently denied having any sort of sexual relationship with Lanny.
Whether it was true or not, it was true to Donna. Donna absolutely 100% believed that Lanny and Francine were intimate with each other, and she documented in detail in that journal things that would support her belief that this was more than just a friendship.
Her entries in the diary showed, well, he's been with Fran all day. He goes here with Fran. He does this with Fran. It was clear that Fran became a point of contention for Donna.
The journal also makes clear that in the countdown to Lanny's death, Donna's anger of the alleged love triangle came to a head.
Donna said at one point in the journal that as things began to unravel quickly, Lanny said to Donna, "If I knew that Francine felt about me the way I do now, no, I would never have asked you to move back in the house." So she's basically heartbroken. He tells her she's got to move out. And I believe what the straw was, she finds out he's going to North Carolina, this last minute business trip with Francine. And he tells her in no uncertain terms, you be moved out of the house when I get back.
There was a suitcase in the bedroom right outside the bathroom that was packed for him to leave on his trip that morning.
He was certainly ready to go, and I think that ultimately she said enough. You're not going anywhere. And it was sort of the last act of a woman's scorn.
You could see her getting more upset, getting closer to the date that Lanny was killed.
More and more layers start to pull back. The evidence is inescapable that, she absolutely killed Lanny Horowitz.
There was no question in our mind that this absolutely was Donna Horowitz.
On October 6th, 2011, 6 days after Lanny's murder, investigators placed Donna under arrest.
We had Donna under observation already by this point. Call was made and they took Donna into custody.
She wasn't interviewed at that time, and she chose not to.
She was charged with first-degree murder with a firearm.
Coming up, will a jury believe that a mild-mannered 65-year-old is capable of murder?
It's not something that society is used to believing, that this upper-class white woman is going to go and just blast her husband 10 times.
Police in the seaside town of Jupiter, Florida, have arrested Donna Horowitz for the murder of her ex-husband, Lanny Horowitz. She's accused of shooting the millionaire real estate developer 10 times on the morning of September 30th, 2011.
Donna Horowitz was charged with first-degree murder with a firearm, and in the state of Florida, that's a mandatory life sentence.
It was clear to us, based on the evidence at the scene, that what took this from a second-degree classic crime of passion to first-degree premeditated murder was the number of the shots.
Premeditation, there's no time limit. It can happen in an instant, as long as it takes the actor to formulate the idea, the thought, the intent to kill.
Her trial begins in January of 2013 at the Palm Beach County Courthouse.
We informed the jury that you're going to learn about this family that lived a nice lifestyle in a beautiful gated community.
Admiral's Cove is a very prestigious, affluent area.
But according to prosecutors, the family's prestige and affluence masked a quiet desperation.
The events that lead to the morning of September 30th are tragic, but as old as time. And basically, to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it's going to be clear to you beyond every doubt at the end of this that this was nothing more than a woman who was heartbroken and had had enough.
It was clear that there was tension, and my mom, you could see her losing weight and stuff as everything seemed to sort of be setting in with her over what was happening and what my dad had done.
It was always our position that she killed Lanny because she had a broken heart. You can feel her broken heart in the journal entries. That this was a woman scorned. This was a woman whose world was slipping away.
Prosecutors believe the final break came on the evening of the 30th, when Lanny announced he was leaving town with Francine.
Our supposition is that he's packed all his things and he's going away with Francine, and then she gets told, "You got to be out of the house when I return."
She came to a point of realizing that his behavior wasn't changing and that he was using her.
It was clear that she had been scorned and he had made a fool of her. He probably made fun of her and ridiculed her. And then he gets in the shower and has not a care in the world, and she basically said, enough's enough.
And I think she just snapped. She went into the bathroom, took both the guns, and while he's in the shower, she just unloaded the firearm.
It's the dance of death. Lanny was not standing still as he's getting murdered. He's ducking, he's rolling, he's weaving, and we know this because of the blood spatter everywhere.
She just continues to shoot. I think she was sick of the frustration, sick of all the comments he was making and the lies.
This is somebody whose world is slipping away, and they are outraged, they are hurt, they are upset, and the manner that this was done, the number of shots, this cries a woman scorned. This cries, love gone bad.
However, prosecutors claim that Donna's rage at Lanny didn't prevent her from trying to cover her tracks.
She switched over to that rational thinking pretty quickly, in that she hears the alarm going off and knows that she has to act quickly.
When Radley responded to answer the front door for the security guard, Donna had the opportunity to move the gun or do whatever, manipulate whatever she wanted to manipulate.
She puts one gun in his hand and then wipes down the other gun, but puts it in the holster so people won't even draw attention to the fact that gun could have been used.
Luckily, they recognized pretty quickly that this wasn't a suicide.
But can prosecutors convince the jury that Donna is a killer?
It's not something that society is used to believing, that this upper class white woman is going to go and just blast her husband 10 times.
When Radley takes the stand for the prosecution, his stunning testimony just might be Donna's salvation.
He stood by his mom. He tried to justify actions.
I felt very bad for her. And I said a million times that if there was ever a case for battered spouse syndrome and temporary insanity, this would have been it.
Radley testified and remembered hearing Donna say he was just so horrible. He was just so horrible, sort of repeating that.
Radley never asked his mother if she killed his father. Radley never asked Donna, "Did you kill Lanny?" And the reason he didn't is because he didn't want to hear the answer. He didn't want to be the person who would have to testify and say, "My mother told me she did this."
He would never totally give his mom up. He said, "All I can tell you is it was only two of us there and I didn't do it."
Coming up, Donna repays Radley by committing the ultimate betrayal.
Here comes your mom, you're the person that's supposed to protect you, saying, "You did this."
The prosecution has rested in the murder trial of Donna Horowitz. The 66-year-old is charged with killing her ex-husband, millionaire real estate developer Lanny Horowitz, in the couple's upscale Florida home.
Our position was always that Donna Horowitz was losing everything, and ultimately she decided that she had had enough.
Her frustration and her hatred became so much that she decided that she was going to kill, the love of her life.
When it's their turn, Donna's defense argues that she wasn't the one who wanted Lanny dead.
The defense argued that it was Radley or that Radley had hired someone to do this.
The defense relied on the smudge of a thumbprint maybe or fingerprint on a gate leading out of the house.
Could have been anybody. It could have been one of us. It could have been a firefighter. It could have been a gardener. It could have been some maintenance person. It could have been anybody.
The defense was trying to argue that meant that there was an unknown killer and that this could have been a hitman hired by Radley because he had purchased this paperback collectible edition of some kind of hire hitman or something like that.
Whether he'd pulled the trigger himself or hired someone to do it, the defense argued that Radley had resented his father for years, especially after serving time on federal firearms charges.
The defense was that he was still angry 5 years later about this weapons piece, that he blamed his father for that. He's pissed at his dad for giving him that advice.
Defense dug into every issue that he and his father had ever had, every conflict that he and his father would have had. They questioned him and pushed him on it. It was clear that Lanny was not a supportive father, and every misstep that Radley took, he was critical.
The defense was basically trying to make out that Radley was the angry, disgruntled child, but he also had ulterior motives, potentially for money, for the inheritance from his father.
Radley was getting everything. He was the sole heir to Lanny Horowitz.
He was due to get $500,000 in a life insurance policy.
Donna's defense seems to be going down this road of Radley's the worst person in the world, he must have done it.
I don't believe for a second that Radley ever dreamed they would be that aggressive and vigorous and basically unrelenting, saying that he was the one that did it. Who does that to their own child?
It got hard after you're listening day after day. You did this, when you didn't. And it was a lot for him.
All this stuff that her defense lawyer tried to say, a hitman and all this kind of crap. And he was just trying to do his job. And his job is to get his client off any way that he can.
On January 17th, the jurors retired to consider their verdict. And less than 2 hours later, they announced their decision.
Ultimately, the verdict was returned for second-degree murder with a firearm.
The jury did a great job seeing through the smoke and mirrors and everything that was being portrayed and put out there by the defense.
The judge sentences Donna to 32 years in prison.
Given Donna's age, it's a life sentence, practically speaking.
We were very comfortable with the outcome of it and the sentence as well.
Donna's single-minded pursuit of retribution had not only destroyed her own future, it also devastated the lives of the people she loved most.
What she did completely blew her family apart. You certainly can't justify something like that.
In this case, unlike a lot of our cases, there's no good guy or bad guy. There was no winner in this.
Lanny lost his life. Donna will never get out of prison. Radley lost both of his parents. Everybody lost, absolutely. And she didn't have to do that. She could have walked away. She chose not to.
She was kind of trying to still live up to that lifestyle of the affluent Jupiter community, and I think in somewhat denial.
There's been a lot of people in this country that want to present this sort of tremendous success through materialistic things, whether it's a house, whether it's cars, whether it's going on boats. And this is a tragic story where once that veneer was pulled back and there was debt and triple mortgages, then massive stress starts to come in. And people aren't honest with each other. And people don't deal with the issues, they just misdirect them, they bury them, and sometimes they explode.